Sometimes people think they hold all the cards in a relationship, but they forget that the other person might just be playing a completely different game. I'm Ellie, 36, and I thought I had figured out the perfect setup. Living in Peter's gorgeous townhouse for the past 6 months, no rent, no utilities, just pure comfort while I kept my options open. Smart, right? Peter and I had been together for 18 months, and everything was working exactly how I wanted it. He's 38, owns his own place, has this whole reformed bad boy thing going on. Used to be wild in his 20s, now he's all responsible and trying to prove he's changed. Perfect for me because he tries so hard to be the good boyfriend that he never questions anything I do. Or at least, he didn't used to. The thing is, I've always believed in having backup plans. Call it smart planning. When my ex-husband Anthony moved back to town last month for some new job at an investment firm downtown, I saw it as an opportunity. We'd been divorced for 4 years, and sure, things ended messy, but time heals wounds, right? Plus, Anthony and I had history. Real history. Not like what I had with Peter, which was comfortable but kind of predictable. I started meeting Anthony for coffee every Friday, just catching up, talking about old times, remembering why we worked so well together before everything fell apart. He'd text me throughout the week, nothing inappropriate, just friendly stuff. Good morning messages, asking how my day went, sometimes a sweet dreams text at night. Normal friend behavior. Peter noticed, obviously. He's not completely clueless, even if he acts like it sometimes. The first time he brought it up, I could see that little vein in his forehead start to pulse the way it does when he's trying not to get upset. Ellie, you've been texting a lot lately. Everything okay? I kept scrolling through my phone, not even looking up. Just catching up with an old friend. Anthony's back in town. Anthony, your ex-husband Anthony? Now I looked at him, putting on my most innocent expression. Yeah, so? We're adults, Peter. Just because we got divorced doesn't mean we can't be friends. He shifted in his chair, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. Peter always does this thing where he tries to think through exactly what he wants to say before he says it. Sometimes it's endearing, mostly it's annoying. I mean, I get that, but he's texting you pretty late at night, and early in the morning. That seems like more than just friendship. Are you seriously going through my phone? I snapped, even though I knew he wasn't. He'd never do that. Too much of a good guy. But offense is the best defense, right? No, I just notice when it buzzes at midnight and you smile while you're texting back. God, Peter, you're being paranoid. Anthony and I are mature adults who stayed friends after our divorce. That's actually healthy, you know. Most people can't manage it. He went quiet after that, which usually meant I'd won. Peter hates conflict. Always backs down when I push back even a little. It's one of the things I actually liked about him in the beginning. No drama, no fighting, just easy. But then Anthony started showing up more. Not just the Friday coffee dates, but little things. He'd swing by my workplace to drop off something he thought I'd like. A book. Coffee from that place I used to love when we were married. Sweet gestures that reminded me why I fell for him in the first place. The breaking point came when I invited Anthony to our Labor Day cookout without asking Peter first. I mean, why would I need permission? It's not like Peter owns me. But the look on his face when Anthony walked into our backyard with a bottle of wine and that smile I remembered so well, Peter looked like I'd slapped him. After everyone left, Peter cornered me in the kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher. We need to talk about this Anthony situation. What situation? I kept my back to him, focusing on arranging plates. He's my friend, he came to a party. Normal people do that. Normal people don't invite their ex-husbands to their current boyfriend's house without at least mentioning it first. I turned around, crossing my arms. I don't need your permission to invite my friends anywhere. That's not what this is about, and you know it. Peter's voice was getting that edge it gets when he's really frustrated. He's not just texting you good morning anymore, Ellie. He's sending you pictures of places you used to go together. He's commenting on everything you post online. He's acting like he wants you back. And what if he does? The words slipped out before I could stop them. But you know what? I didn't regret them. What if he realizes he made a mistake letting me go? That doesn't mean anything's gonna happen. Peter stared at me for a long moment. But you like the attention. I like feeling appreciated, yes. Is that a crime? Not by your ex-husband while you're living with your current boyfriend, no. The way he said living with irritated me. Like I was some kind of freeloader instead of his girlfriend who happened to stay at his place most of the time. Look, Anthony is important to me. We share history. Just because we divorced doesn't mean I have to cut him out completely. He's texting you goodnight messages, Ellie. That's not normal ex behavior. I rolled my eyes. Men are so dramatic about everything. You're being insecure. Anthony and I are mature adults who stayed friends. If you can't handle that, maybe this relationship isn't for you. That shut him up for a second. I could see him processing, trying to figure out how to respond. This is where Peter usually apologizes and drops it, because he's terrified of losing me. He's told me before that I'm the best thing that's happened to him, that he never thought he'd find someone who understood him after all his wild years. But instead, he surprised me. So you're choosing maintaining this friendship over my comfort in our relationship? I'm choosing not to be controlled by my boyfriend's jealousy issues. That's not what this is, isn't it? I stepped closer to him, using the voice that usually makes him back down. You want me to cut off a friendship because it makes you uncomfortable. That's literally the definition of controlling. Peter looked at me for what felt like forever. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, I understand your position. Finally, I smiled, feeling that familiar rush of winning an argument. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Actually, he said, and something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. I'm keeping Anthony in my life. Deal with it or leave. The words hung between us. I'd expected him to cave, like he always did. Instead, he was just standing there, looking at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Those are your two options, Ellie. Deal with it or leave. I felt this weird flutter in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Peter was bluffing. He had to be. Fine, I choose option 3. What option 3? I'll figure it out. I laughed because this was ridiculous. Peter didn't do ultimatums. Peter did whatever made me happy. You don't get to give me ultimatums in your own house, babe. But he didn't smile back. He just nodded again, that same slow, deliberate nod. We'll see. That night, I went to bed feeling like I'd won something, but also weirdly unsettled. Peter was quiet during dinner, didn't try to cuddle during our show, just sat on his side of the couch checking his phone. When I tried to initiate conversation, he gave me these short, polite responses that felt more distant than if he'd been angry. I woke up around 3 a.m. and realized he wasn't in bed. I found him in his office, laptop open, surrounded by papers. When I asked what he was doing, he said he couldn't sleep and was just taking care of some things. Normal enough, but something felt off. The next morning, Peter was gone before I woke up. He left a note saying he had an early meeting and would see me later. Sweet, considerate Peter, always thinking of others. I made myself coffee in his expensive machine, ate breakfast in his sunny kitchen, and got ready for work in his spacious bathroom. This was exactly why our arrangement worked so well. Around lunchtime, I got a text from Anthony asking if I wanted to grab coffee after work. I said yes immediately, because why shouldn't I? Peter had made it clear he was going to deal with it, so there was no reason to change my plans. Anthony looked good when I met him at our usual spot downtown. He'd been working out, I could tell, and he'd gotten a haircut that made him look younger. We talked for 2 hours, just like old times. He told me about his new job, asked about mine, and we laughed about memories from when we were married. I've been thinking a lot about us lately, he said as we were getting ready to leave, about how good we were together before everything went wrong. My heart did this little skip. Yeah? I know we both made mistakes, but maybe we were just too young then, too stubborn to work through things. I touched his arm lightly. Maybe we were. He covered my hand with his. I'd like to try again, Ellie, if you're open to it. I should have pulled my hand away, should have reminded him about Peter, but I didn't. Instead, I let myself imagine what it would be like to be with Anthony again. The passion we used to have, the way he used to look at me like I was the most fascinating person in the world. I'm with Peter now, I said, but my voice was softer than it should have been. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I was comfortable. secure. Peter took care of me, never gave me any drama, let me do whatever I wanted. But happy? It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Anthony squeezed my hand. I know I hurt you before, but I've grown up. I know what I want now, and it's you. I went home that night feeling electric. Peter was already there, cooking dinner, acting completely normal. He asked about my day, listened to my work stories, didn't mention Anthony once. I almost felt guilty for meeting him, but then I reminded myself that Peter had said he would deal with it. This was me being honest about my friendships. Over the next few days, Anthony and I texted more frequently. He'd send me pictures of places we used to go together, articles he thought I'd find interesting, little inside jokes that made me smile. Peter noticed. I could see him watching me when I checked my phone, but he didn't say anything. Friday came around, and Anthony and I had our regular coffee date. Except this time, he brought up something that made my pulse race. I've been looking at apartments, he said casually, stirring his latte. Something bigger than what I have now, maybe something that could fit 2 people. Anthony, I'm not pressuring you. I'm just saying, if you ever decide you want something different, something more exciting than what you have now, I'm here. When I got home that evening, Peter was in the kitchen making dinner like always. But something was different. He seemed lighter somehow. Not tense like he'd been all week. "How was your day?" he asked, not looking up from chopping vegetables. "Fine. Busy." I watched him work, trying to figure out what had changed. "You seem happy." "Do I?" He glanced at me with a small smile. "Yeah, I guess I am. I figured some things out today." "What kind of things?" "Just clarity about our situation." The way he said our situation made something cold settle in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Peter was probably just accepting that Anthony was going to be part of my life. Good. It was about time. That weekend, Peter was weirdly affectionate. More touchy than he'd been in weeks, suggesting we go out to dinner, asking if I wanted to watch a movie together. I should have been happy, but instead I felt annoyed. Where was this attention when I actually wanted it? Now that I was reconnecting with Anthony, suddenly Peter wanted to be the perfect boyfriend. Sunday night, I was texting with Anthony about meeting for lunch the next week when Peter sat down next to me on the couch. "Can I ask you something?" I didn't look up from my phone. "Sure." "Are you planning to keep seeing Anthony?" "We're friends, Peter. Friends see each other." "That's not what I meant." I finally looked at him. "Then what did you mean?" "I mean, are you planning to keep building whatever this is with him while you're living with me?" The question irritated me because it was so loaded, like I was doing something wrong by maintaining a friendship. I'm not building anything. We're just reconnecting as friends. Friends who talk about getting back together? My stomach dropped. What? Friends who text about shared memories and how good you used to be together. Friends who make plans for the future? Have you been reading my messages? I stood up, fury rising in my chest. How dare you? I haven't read anything, Ellie. I don't need to. Your face tells me everything I need to know. I stared at him, trying to figure out how much he actually knew versus how much he was guessing. You're being paranoid again. Am I? Peter stood up too, and for the first time in our entire relationship, he looked completely calm while I felt like I was scrambling. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using me for stability while you figure out if you want to get back together with your ex-husband. That's not. I started, but he held up a hand. I told you last week that I understood your position, and I do. You want to keep Anthony in your life, and you want me to deal with it or leave. Right, and you said you'd deal with it. Peter smiled, and something about that smile made my skin crawl. I did deal with it, Ellie. I chose option 3. Before I could ask what that meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his smile widened. That's actually perfect timing. Anthony just texted me back. The world tilted sideways. What? Yeah, we had lunch yesterday. Just the 2 of us. Really interesting conversation. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You what? I called him Wednesday morning. Told him I thought we should talk. Man to man. He was hesitant at first, but once I explained that I just wanted to understand the situation better, he agreed to meet. You had lunch with my ex-husband behind my back? The same way you've been having coffee with him behind mine, yes. I wanted to scream at him, but part of me was terrified to hear what Anthony had told him. "What did you talk about?" Peter pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. "Well, first he told me about your marriage. How you kept your college boyfriend Brad around the same way you're keeping him around now. Constant texting, coffee dates, telling Anthony he was being controlling when he objected." My mouth went dry. "Anthony's lying." "Is he?" "Because he showed me some interesting text messages. Screenshots, actually." Peter turned his phone toward me, and I saw my own words reflected back at me. Messages I'd sent to Anthony over the past few weeks. Peter's sweet but kind of predictable. "Remember our trip to Napa? Those were amazing times. Maybe we gave up too soon. I think about us a lot, what we could have been if we'd both been more mature. Sometimes I wonder if I settled too quickly after our divorce, jumped into something safe instead of fighting for what we really had." All sent within the past week. All while I was lying next to Peter at night, letting him think everything was fine between us. "Anthony seemed pretty uncomfortable showing me these," Peter continued, his voice still unnaturally calm. "Said he's actually been seeing someone for the past 8 months, someone serious. He's been trying to keep distance from you, but you've been pretty persistent." The room felt like it was spinning. "He never mentioned anyone else. Why would he? You never asked. You just assumed he was sitting around waiting for you to decide you wanted him back." I sank onto the couch, trying to process everything. Anthony was seeing someone else. Had been for months, which meant all those coffee dates, all those texts about getting back together, all those hints about apartments for 2 people. What had that been about? "There's more," Peter said, sitting back down across from me. "Anthony told me some other interesting things about your marriage. About why it really ended. We just grew apart. You cheated on him with Brad. He found you in your bed 6 months before the divorce." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't like that. "And then you cleaned him out in the divorce. Kept the house, got alimony, even though you were the one who broke your vows. Your dad's lawyer friend made sure Anthony couldn't fight it properly." I felt exposed, like Peter was peeling back layers of my life that I'd carefully covered. "Anthony agreed to those terms. Because you'd opened credit cards in his name and maxed them out. Because you had photos from his bachelor party that you threatened to use against him in court. He was starting his business and couldn't afford a legal battle." Each revelation felt like another punch. How much had Anthony told him? "Why are you doing this?" "Because I needed to know who I was really living with." Peter leaned forward, "And now I do." He stood up and walked toward his office. I followed him, panic rising in my chest. "Peter, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been planning to do the same thing to me that you did to Anthony." He gestured toward his desk, where several papers were spread out. "I checked my credit report, Ellie. Found an inquiry from 2 weeks ago that I didn't authorize." My stomach dropped to my feet. The credit card application. I'd been so careful, but apparently not careful enough. I also went through my filing cabinet. Found some interesting paperwork that I don't remember signing. He picked up a form and waved it at me. "Adding you as a beneficiary to my 401k. Filled out but not submitted yet. Were you waiting for the right moment to slip it in with other documents?" I couldn't speak, couldn't think of any explanation that wouldn't make this worse. And my Amazon account. Quite a few purchases I don't remember making. Designer bags, jewelry, expensive perfume. All shipped to Morgan's house so I wouldn't see them arrive. All on my credit card. The room felt like it was closing in on me. "I can explain all of this." "Can you explain this?" He picked up a folder from his desk and opened it. "Your business plan. For a boutique you want to open. Very detailed financial projections. And look here, under startup costs. Tom's investment, $150,000. Interesting name choice, by the way. Tom instead of Peter. Almost like you copied this from a template." I stared at the papers in his hands, trying to figure out how he'd found everything. I'd been so careful to keep it all separate, hidden away where he'd never look. "When were you planning to ask me for $150,000, Ellie, or were you just going to take it?" It wasn't like that. My voice sounded weak, even to me. I was just exploring options, planning for our future. Our future? While texting your ex-husband that I'm boring and you maybe gave up too soon? I felt tears starting to form, not from sadness but from frustration. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Peter, you're taking everything out of context. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been systematically planning to drain my accounts while setting up your ex-husband as a backup plan. And when I objected to the backup plan, you gave me an ultimatum. Deal with it or leave. He walked past me toward the living room, and I saw that he'd already started packing my things into boxes. My clothes, my toiletries, my books, everything I'd slowly moved into his place over the past 6 months. What are you doing? I chose option 3, remember? I'm dealing with it my way. Peter picked up his phone. I've already changed all my passwords, removed you as an authorized user on my credit card, and called a locksmith for tomorrow morning. You have until then to get your stuff. You can't just throw me out. I live here. You're a guest who doesn't pay rent, remember? No lease, no tenant rights. I checked with a lawyer. The casual way he said it, like he'd been planning this for days, made me realize how badly I'd underestimated him. Peter, please, let's talk about this like adults. Adults don't try to steal from their partners, Ellie. Adults don't maintain backup relationships while living with someone else. Adults don't give ultimatums and expect no consequences. I tried one more time, using the voice that usually worked on him. I made mistakes, okay? But throwing me out isn't going to solve anything. We can work through this. Peter looked at me for a long moment, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to him. Then he shook his head. The thing is, Ellie, I don't want to work through this. I don't want to be with someone who sees me as a stepping stone to something better. I don't want to wake up every day wondering what you're planning to take from me next. He walked toward the front door and opened it. You can stay at Morgan's tonight. Your boxes will be in the garage tomorrow with the code 1234. After that, I never want to see you again. I stood there staring at him, trying to process that this was really happening. You'll regret this. When you realize what you're giving up, you'll regret it. Maybe, but I doubt it. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door, but I couldn't resist one last shot. Anthony was right about you. You're not man enough to handle a woman with options. Peter smiled that same calm, cold smile. Actually, Anthony warned me about this exact conversation, said you'd try to make me feel inadequate when your manipulation didn't work. He also said to tell you that Declan says hi. Who the hell is Declan? Anthony's girlfriend, the one he's been serious about for 8 months, the one he's moving in with next month. Peter's smile widened. Your backup plan was never really a plan at all, Ellie. It was just wishful thinking. I left that night feeling like the ground had shifted underneath me. How had everything gone so wrong so fast? 3 days ago, I had a boyfriend who adored me, a comfortable living situation, and an ex-husband who wanted me back. Now I had none of those things. I stayed at Morgan's that night, crying and raging about Peter's betrayal, about Anthony's lies, about how unfair everything was. Morgan listened for a while, but even she seemed skeptical when I told her my side of the story. Ellie, honey, you were kind of playing with fire there. I wasn't playing with anything. I was maintaining a friendship. A friendship where you were talking about getting back together while living with another guy? It wasn't like that. But even as I said it, I knew how it sounded. I knew how it looked. I just couldn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. The next morning, I went to get my things from Peter's garage. Everything was neatly packed and labeled, like he'd taken care with it even while kicking me out. I loaded box after box into Morgan's car, feeling humiliated and angry. As I was loading the last box, Peter's neighbor came out to get his mail. He looked at me with obvious pity. Moving out? Temporarily, I said, because I wasn't ready to admit this was permanent. That's too bad. You two seemed happy. I wanted to scream that we had been happy, that Peter was throwing away something good over nothing, but I just nodded and got in the car. Over the next few days, I tried calling Peter multiple times. I wanted to explain, to make him understand that he was overreacting, but he never answered. I drove by his house a few times, but his car was never there. I also tried reaching out to Anthony, thinking maybe I could salvage something from this mess. But when I called, a woman answered his phone. Anthony's phone. This is Declan." I hung up without saying anything, feeling sick. So it was true. He really was with someone else. Had been for months while I was fantasizing about getting back together. A week later, I was still staying at Morgan's, sleeping on her couch and trying to figure out my next move. I'd been looking at apartments, but everything in my price range was depressing compared to Peter's townhouse. I'd gotten used to granite countertops and walk-in closets and a backyard where I could sit with my morning coffee. That's when the police showed up at Morgan's door. "Ma'am, are you Ellie Rodriguez?" "Yes. We need to speak with you about some attempted financial fraud." My legs went weak. "What?" They explained that Peter had filed a report about the credit card application, about the Amazon purchases, about the attempted wire transfer I'd made from his bank account the night after he kicked me out. I'd been desperate, thinking maybe if I could just get enough money to get my own place, I could figure out how to fix everything else. But Peter had set up two-factor authentication on all his accounts. The transfer failed, and the bank flagged it as suspicious activity. "You'll need to come with us, ma'am." I spent 12 hours in jail before Morgan could bail me out. 12 hours sitting in a cell, thinking about how everything had gone so wrong so fast. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be the bad guy here. My parents hired a lawyer, not my dad's golf buddy this time, but a real criminal defense attorney who cost more than I made in 3 months. He told me bluntly that I was looking at multiple felony charges and possible prison time. "Your best bet is to plead guilty and hope for probation." "I'm not pleading guilty to anything. This is all a misunderstanding." He looked at me like I was delusional. "Miss Rodriguez, they have documentation of attempted identity theft, wire fraud, and credit card fraud. There's no misunderstanding here." The preliminary hearing was a nightmare. Peter testified about finding all the documents, about the credit applications, about the wire transfer attempt. Anthony testified about my history of financial manipulation during our marriage. Even the bank's fraud investigator testified about the pattern of attempted theft. My lawyer tried to argue that I thought Peter and I were in a common-law marriage, that I believed I had a right to access his accounts. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, this state doesn't recognize common-law marriage. And even if it did, that wouldn't give you the right to open credit accounts in someone else's name without their knowledge." In the end, I took the plea deal. 6 months probation, 100 hours of community service, restitution for all the fraudulent purchases, and a no-contact order preventing me from contacting Peter. But the worst part was losing my job. Turns out having fraud charges on your record makes it pretty much impossible to work in medical billing. Who knew that handling other people's financial information required, trustworthiness? So here I am, 18 months later, living with my parents again at 37 years old, working retail for barely above minimum wage, and watching everyone else move on with their lives while mine fell apart. Peter's doing great, from what I can see on social media before I block and unblock him in cycles of masochistic curiosity. He's dating someone new, a nurse who looks exactly like the kind of wholesome, uncomplicated woman he probably should have been with all along. They went to Europe together last month, posted pictures of themselves looking happy and carefree in front of famous landmarks. Anthony married Declan 6 months ago. I found out when one of our mutual friends posted congratulations on Facebook. They had a small ceremony at some vineyard upstate. Looked beautiful and romantic and everything I thought I wanted. Even Morgan has started distancing herself from me. She says I need to take responsibility for my choices and work on myself before she can be a real friend again. Easy for her to say. She's not the one whose life imploded. My parents keep pushing me to go to therapy, to process what happened and learn from my mistakes. But what's to process? I made some poor decisions, sure, but everyone's acting like I'm some kind of criminal mastermind instead of someone who just got caught up in a complicated situation. The truth is, I still don't understand why Peter had to be so extreme about everything. So I kept Anthony around as a friend. So what? So I made some financial plans for our future without telling him first. Couples do that all the time. So I tried to access his accounts when I was desperate and scared. I was going to pay it back. But apparently, Peter couldn't handle being with a woman who had any kind of independence or complexity. He wanted someone simple and easy and grateful, someone who would never challenge him or make him feel insecure. Someone like his new girlfriend, probably. Sometimes I drive by his house, just to see if anything's changed. Last week, I saw him in the front yard with her, planting flowers in the garden I used to sit in. They looked domestic and boring and perfectly content with their little suburban life. I wanted to stop, to roll down my window, and tell them both exactly what I thought of their pathetic existence. But the no-contact order means I can't even drive down his street without risking another legal problem. So instead, I drove home to my childhood bedroom, where I'm surrounded by participation trophies and prom photos and all the evidence of a life that was supposed to turn out so much better than this. The worst part is that everyone acts like I brought this on myself. Like I'm the villain in some story where Peter is the innocent victim and I'm the manipulative ex who got what she deserved. But they don't know the whole story. They don't know how lonely I was in that relationship, how Peter never really saw me for who I was, how Anthony represented something real and passionate that I'd been missing. They don't know that I was just trying to keep my options open in a world where women have to be smart about protecting themselves. They don't know that every choice I made was about survival, about not ending up trapped and dependent and powerless. But none of that matters now. Peter got his perfect ending with his perfect girlfriend. Anthony got his fresh start with someone who doesn't have any complicated history. And I'm the one paying the price for everyone else's inability to handle a woman who refuses to be simple. I still think about that night when Peter gave me the ultimatum. Deal with it or leave. I chose option 3. But it turns out he had an option 3 of his own, and his was a lot more effective than mine. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just cut Anthony off when Peter first asked me to. If I'd been more careful about the financial stuff, more subtle about my planning. But then I remember that I shouldn't have to change who I am to make other people comfortable. I was just being honest about my needs and my feelings. I was just refusing to settle for less than I deserved. And if Peter couldn't handle that level of authenticity, then maybe we were never right for each other anyway. The restraining order expires in 4 months. After that, legally, I can contact Peter again if I want to. Part of me thinks I should let sleeping dogs lie, move on with my life, focus on rebuilding. But part of me thinks he should know what his choices cost me. How his vindictive overreaction destroyed my career, my living situation, my relationships. How his inability to forgive and move forward ruined everything good we had together. Maybe someday he'll realize what he threw away. Maybe someday he'll understand that love isn't about control and possession, it's about accepting someone fully, complications and all. But I'm not holding my breath. Peter always was too rigid, too black and white in his thinking. Too afraid of anything that challenged his neat, orderly view of how relationships should work. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe I deserve someone who can handle all of me. The messy parts, the complicated parts, the parts that refuse to be contained in someone else's idea of who I should be. I just have to figure out how to find that person while living in my parents' basement and working retail. But I will figure it out. Because despite everything that's happened, despite all the people who've given up on me, I still believe I'm worth more than the life I'm living right now. And someday I'm gonna prove it.